the Rubik's Cube, the most iconic puzzle slash toy in the entire world. Almost anywhere you go, any country, any city, people not only have experience and are familiar with this thing, but they probably also have some form of PTSD from attempting to figure it out on their own. But the reality is, that's pretty close to impossible. Not impossible, obviously, people have done it. The inventor himself, Erno Rubik, who just had a birthday. Happy 50th, Rubik's. He had reportedly taken over a month to solve his own invention, right? So obviously, it's pretty difficult. Now, I could go into details on numbers on what it, or how many combinations there are, scrambles and everything else. You'll hear the number 43 quintillion and all these other things, but that's not the purpose of today's video. So, what is the purpose of today's video? This brand within the cubing community, more specifically speed cubing, this, even though it's the original brand, it gets bashed on quite a bit for a few different reasons. Just about every major cubing YouTuber out there have probably made a video about this cube, or previous versions of them, I should say, more like the brand itself, right? And why is that? And why is the original brand, the original cube, why is it considered inferior in this little niche hobby that we have? So, for context, you can go to just about any major brand store, whether it's Walmart, Target, Macy's if you're in the States. I don't know if we have those up here in Canada, but the point is, any one of these stores, if you're going to find a cube, chances are it's going to be this one, because it's everywhere. People know the name. People trust the name, I suppose, but for the most part, it's the only one that people have seen. It's the only one that they're familiar with. Whereas other brands, let's say like this, Moyu, which anyone who knows details about the speed cubing community and manufacturers and what they make, they will know that this is a very reputable brand, right? And based out of China, as is GAN, which is Moyu's biggest competitor, and vice versa, right? And the interesting thing is that these Chinese speed cubing companies have been able to innovate and create something designed to be able to be done very quickly. All the world records currently are done on speed cubes. So what is the difference? Well, for one, let's just use this GAN 11M Pro as an example. And typically, this cube would come with a white logo, or a blue logo on the white side, in the white center here. But I have ordered a specialty cap to replace it so that I didn't have that. Just because, for myself, it's an aesthetic thing. I prefer symmetry. And when you have a logo on, it just feels like it's not quite aesthetically as pleasing as this neutral kind of thing, right? It's not a branding thing. And the GAN logo would look something like this. Now, this is an older GAN cube. It's unavailable right now, but this is a perfect example to use for this, now that I think about it. Okay, so this came out about 4 or 5 years ago now, and it used to be a collaboration with Rubik, or the Rubik's brand. Now, you could probably see that there are some similarities. Oh, let's get, yeah, there we go. There are some similarities, but there are vast differences as well. So what is it? This is the GAN tiled cube. They call it their speed cube. The GAN GSC, I believe, is how they marketed it. So GAN speed cube. Now, previously, before this, there was a Rubik speed, right? But if we can just look at some of the details here. It has GAN's proprietary honeycomb centers, or pieces on the inside. The tracks here, if it'll focus, you can kind of see it has those kind of deeper grooves in them. Now, this is a non-magnetic cube. So that is one of the things that it will have in common with the typical Rubik's brand that you'll find at Walmart or anywhere else. Now, this older version that GAN did here, and it's something that I wish I had noticed or had been pointed out a little differently, is when you get different cubes, they can have different shades. I know this doesn't seem like it's that big of a difference between these two. In person, it's a much bigger difference in shades. So even as I'm looking through the lens, this is pretty close. It seems a little bit darker than what the camera's showing, but this is very pale. It's a kind of a pale. They used to call these half bright shades, and it used to be a lot more popular on the older cubes. The red, I still love the way that the red looks. The blue as well is very similar, almost identical. And the orange, I find this is a little more pastel as well, a little more almost like a faded, brighter color, where I prefer the darker. So between these two, just speaking aesthetically on beauty, I actually prefer the color shades on the Rubik's brand now. But let's take a look at this, see if I can get a piece out. It might be a little too tight to get one out, but if I can, which anyone who's never done this before, you want to kind of turn sideways, but you can also use a down chair. Let me try a different piece, because I do have it set up to be a little tight at the moment, but if you can get lucky, put that on the 45, and it can pop out. Oh, I don't want to break it because I know I can't get another one of these. So. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna give up on that for the moment, because I don't wanna loosen it. But actually maybe let's just see. Okay, get a cap off. I usually don't do this with my fingernails either. Okay, so we can see a tensioning system. So let's just do that. That'll be easy enough. Because on the inside, just taking a piece out, all that you'll really see anyways is you'll just see those white tracks. But yeah, anyhow, they had this system called GES nuts. Now, this isn't the one that came with this cube when I first got it. There was a different cube that had the exact same systems. And these were a stronger spring, and it gave it more stability. So I had swapped them from that other cube and put them on here. But it was a very simple thing, right? Okay, what does GS mean? Okay, let's start with that. It's a spring encased in this hexagon nut, right? Each one had different colors when they had them, and the idea was you'd screw it on, because it's a screw that it goes onto, and then you'd try and make that flush with the screw, so it'd be even on each side, and that'll give that certain tension. So this one was a stronger one. When I first got this, and I've learned this as well, this is something that I've noticed the longer that I have been cubing, which I started in 2021 with the 3x3 anyways. 2020, I had picked up a V-Cube 2x2 in a local pharmacy or drugstore. And when I was going to college at the time, and a lot of our classes in 2020 were all online. Being somebody who, as you can see with my musical instruments and things, I like to do things with my hands. I like to keep them busy. And these Zoom call meetings and that, a lot of the time you didn't need to have your camera on unless you're, specifically talking to someone or had to answer something. But with that, I wanted to keep my hands busy, and I had a bucket list of, I want to be able to solve a Rubik's Cube, just because it seems like it'd be cool. Get one, do it once, up on the shelf, say you can do it, hell yeah, right? That's not quite what happened. Because I never thought that this was going to be a hobby that I would get into and stay involved with. But I remember ordering my first 3x3 in the mail, and this was about a year after I started 2x2. Because I picked up that 2x2 thinking, how hard can it be? Turns out it was a lot harder than I expected. And I had this element of pride, which I think is very common, not necessarily in the cubing community, but just in people in general, thinking they have to be able to do it by themselves. I'm not looking it up, I'm gonna figure it out. Which usually ends up with an unsolved, scrambled cube sitting in a corner somewhere with festering hatred in the mind of whoever was trying to do it. Because there are more combinations on this. Like, you could spend your entire life just turning randomly and it will never solve. That's just the reality of it, right? But so I grabbed my first 3x3 in 2021, after I had learned how to do the 2x2, solved it by accident. That one you could do by accident. I was watching TV, probably Naruto, and I could always get it to one shape, one area, which I now know is the T-perm. I just needed to swap 2 corners. I could always get it to that spot, but I didn't know what to do after that. So I'd get it to that spot, and then I'd start playing around with some of the things I knew, and I ended up solving it once, and I went, finally, I can put my ego aside now. I'm looking this up. How do I solve a 2x2? So figured that out, got hooked onto it because it was so satisfying to turn. So that was the first one I learned, was on that cheaper V Cube, which is very similar in a lot of ways to the feel of the Rubik's brand, you know. But I decided to look into it after. I ordered myself a GAN 2x2, a magnetic one. And at that time, there was a lot of talk online that stickerless cubes, stickerless meaning no stickers, kind of like this, it's just like built into the plastic is colored that way, they were not competition legal. So I ended up ordering a stickered GAN 2x2. I think it was the 251. And it was better than anything I'd ever felt. My first magnetic cube. I didn't like stickers. I'd wish I'd gone with stickerless, because even at that time, I think you didn't need, or that rule had been changed, but the myth had still been perpetrated or perpetuated across social media and YouTube and everything else. But that has now been rehomed to my little girl. But anyhow, back to the topic at hand. I ordered my first real 3x3 online, and it happened to be the GAN I carry, first iteration, Bluetooth cube, thinking I can hook it up to my phone, hook it up to an app, and I will be able to learn how to solve this, and I can get over my fear of this thing, right? And the first thing that I really knew how to do in terms of algorithms, when I was learning the 2x2, the first thing that I learned was the T-perm. Not the greatest way to start. I should have learned the beginner method on the 2x2. Instead, I spent countless hours learning how to get it to that one position, and then that's when I looked up how to do the T-perm that would solve that, and that's just the way that I learned how to do 2x2. And it was really bad for a long time, because it was usually me messing around, scrambling around, whatever, until I could get it to that one state, which a lot of the time took me a long time to get to, and then I'd do a T-perm and then feel good about myself. But when I got a 3x3, that was the one algorithm that I knew going into it. But the surprising thing is, instead of hooking up the cube to the app that was there, what I ended up doing instead was just watching J-Perm's video, how to solve the cube in 10 minutes. And I'd sit, I'd watch, I'd rewind, I'd watch. My recommendation for anyone starting this, don't watch the whole, or you can watch the whole thing through the first time if you'd like. But if you're actively trying to learn, make sure you have a cube in your hand as you're doing it, not just watching it and then picking up the cube later and trying to do it. Have the cube, watch the first element. There's like 7 steps, okay? And with those 7 steps, for each step, pause it at the end of it, rewind it, and practice that thing, right? And that first step being making the cross. You know, and that's what I did. I watched that, and it probably took me, I think it was around an hour. And it probably helped. It would have been longer if I had no experience with that 2x2 and some of the things I was doing, you know, with twisty puzzles, mostly just being that 2x2. But yeah, it took me about 45 minutes to an hour from what I'd already known. And this is a year after doing the 2x2. I had finished college, started working, thinking, I think it's finally time to give this a go. Do the famous one. I'm not afraid anymore. Or I, you know, wasn't as intimidated by it. But back to the real purpose of this video. So this actually is a really smooth feeling cube. There's no magnets in it. It used to be a collaboration between GAN and Rubik's, and it's really comfortable. I didn't like it at first when I first got it because I was just getting into magnetic speed cubes. And anyone just getting into this hobby, I highly recommend getting a magnetic cube. It doesn't even matter what it is, because just about any one of them will have a better feeling out of the box than the Rubik's brand, right? And from my experience, at least as an older cuber, it might just be my personality, I feel like the most important trait of a cube is the feeling. Now, why would I say that? I believe that feeling of the turns is more important than performance, because when you're first starting off, you're not going to be turning it, you know, mock chicken. You're just going to be doing a couple things at a time to try and understand what's going on, right? So with that being said, the most important thing is that it feels nice. Why? Because you're going to be spending hours, countless hours, potentially, twisting and turning this thing. And if it doesn't feel nice to do, if you have to put more thought and energy into making sure that everything just lines up before you can turn it, then you're probably not going to have a good time, right? Now, there are benefits straight out of the box with the Rubik's brand. You could probably hear that too. Spring noise, which is, it's easy to fix, but Rubik's, I love you, but we could do this way better. Now, I just watched Antoine Cantin's video. He's a Canadian cuber from Ontario, more specifically our capital, Ottawa. And he had a factory tour because he's living in China right now. He went to Moyu, the Moyu factory. They make 70 million cubes a year. And as far as I know, the Rubik's cube from the Rubik's brand is one of the highest sold inventions, not just in toys and puzzles, but products in general that have ever been sold. And they claim over 500 million, so 500 million, which is really good. But when you start to incorporate the numbers coming from like Moyu and GAN and Diansheng and Qiyi and all these other brands that are into performance and, you know, speed cubing and going with that in different sizes and shapes from 2x2 all the way to, you know, 7x7 and pyraminxes and scubes and all these other things. When you start incorporating that and realizing like there's way more sold from these other companies, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they feel better. There's higher populations where they're being sold as well. They're made in China. You could probably imagine that there's probably a lot of people within China that are solving these cubes. And are they going to spend more money to get a non-magnetic cube that doesn't feel great, doesn't sound great? Oh, that one's a little better, but probably not for long. Oh, there we go. See? And let's say a lot of these, they will be considered toys. So there's going to be more mature people that that will be buying these as compared to, younger children, teens. And if they spend, so for me, this was $13 Canadian to get. I grabbed it yesterday from my local bookstore. They had a couple in there, which I was asking them about it as well, because I remember them having more of like Dunkin' and some other brands, but they keep selling out. And so I was talking to them, asking like, have you noticed that there seems to be a resurgence and this is coming back? She goes, well, I can't keep them on the shelf, so that's probably a good sign, right? And I love that. I do love that you can get these just about anywhere, but it definitely has some problems, and that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. There's the first one that's quite apparent, right? The spring noise. Because guess what? That is unpleasant. It's just simply unpleasant. If you're trying to turn, whether you're in public or around other people, they're going to hear that and go, can you stop? Please stop. But for yourself as well, like, it's a difficult puzzle, and you want the least amount of distractions as possible when you're trying to learn how to do it. And if you do get better and you can do all the fast stuff, it's not going to be as enjoyable if you keep getting these sounds, right? And it just doesn't sound good. I don't know if it actually affects your performance, but you can almost hear it like it adds an extra level of resistance. Well, what I want to know from somebody who's experienced with setting cubes up, like, I have been known, or I've become known locally now as the Cubesmith. The reason being, I spent so much time on my own out here because I didn't know any other cubers. I was on night shift for a long time, and while I was on night shift, that's what kind of made me grind, trying to get better at cubing and having some extra income at the time. I'd buy and collect different cubes, so curious about the technology. So this is a Moyu. This is the RS3M V5 Ball Core UV Coated Edition. Yeah, and we all know what the names are like in the cubing community, right? UV coating, just like this last one that I showed you, has been a recent development and innovation within cubing. Very similar if you've ever seen like gel nails or, I think that's it. So it's a UV setting coat, or the nail polish that is being used. And then you put it into a UV light, which cures it and makes it hard and smooth. And this is exactly what this feels like, right? So it adds extra protection. And the biggest reason for it, that it has been implemented and become so popular, is the grip, right? Now, I have some theories about this, because the other option for finishes on cubes has been matte finish or frosted, And the interesting thing with that, a lot of the times if you get a frosted cube or a matte cube, at first it'll have that feeling, but in time that polishes out from your fingers. And so it becomes semi-glossy after, depending on, the company and how or what their plastic feels like and is made of. It will change how long it takes for it to become more glossy, right? I prefer the UV coating, and from my understanding is people that typically have drier hands most of the time usually like the UV coating because it adds that extra grip, whereas people who have more moist or like clammy hands or sweat out of their hands a lot, they find that UV coating gets too slippery for them. So it's kind of an opposite thing. Dry hands feels amazing, grips great, right? Wet hands, you'll probably prefer the matte finish or frosted finish. But so I took a piece out here for a reason. I wanted to show you one cool thing just on the aesthetics aspect and the looks. Moyu has done some really interesting things. This was a new innovation that on their higher end cubes, or what's a good way to describe this? If you're unfamiliar with their cubes, this cube, the RS3M V5, was a continuation of a budget line they had called the RS3M. In 2020, they came out with the RS3M 2020, which has probably become the highest selling speed cube, at least, that we've ever seen, because it was $10 or $9. It had magnets. It had a dual adjustment system, which, here, I'll open this cap so you can see what that is if you're unfamiliar. So a dual compression system. That's this outer ring that you see here, and it has teeth on it. So if you turn it, like, it only goes in one direction, but it clicks up to the next one, and it'll keep doing that. And what that does is by bringing this up, it compresses the spring more, so the spring gets closer and closer, so it gives you more tension. That'll give you that more stability, right, as opposed to more flexibility and being looser. Okay, but this one, there's no spring in there. There are two small donut-like magnets that are put together in the opposite polarities, adding a spring-like elasticity. Okay, and on the inside here, so you can see what the tracks look like on these pieces, but there's that blue ball there. What's that about? There are magnets impregnated at the locations of the corners. So there's 8 magnets, and these are neodymium magnets, strong rare earth magnets. So there's a corner there. Hard to focus with too many different things going on. Yeah, so that is magnetic, right? So each of the corners have these magnets, and they attract to the ball in the core there, right? Now, this cube, being their highest end version, they had 4 different versions. So this one has the blue internals, or the teal. Their standard was just what they call primary, just white, right? And all it was a screw and spring. That was it, simple. The next iteration up was a maglev edition. So it was the exact same thing, but instead of the spring, they put in the 2 magnets like I have in this version. And the color on the inside, where you see all the blue on this, it's purple instead, which I find gorgeous. That's one of the things that has attracted me to Moyu, was their dedication to trying different colors that can fit different people. They first came out with the first maglev cube ever to exist was actually Moyu, although it's a contentious thing between, was it the Moyu WRM 2021 maglev, or was it the GAN 12? Because both of them almost identically dropped at the same time with maglev. Right? But anyhow, this cube feels amazing. And what those magnets do on the corners, they allow it to become more stable, right? And part of that is, you finish a turn, it doesn't take much effort, but as it gets closer to that turn, it kind of self-corrects, self-aligns. There's nothing like that right now in a standard Rubik's Cube. This is the GAN again. So My question is, someone with some experience with doing setups, which I've done quite a bit in all these other cubes, how good can we make this cube feel? And here was one of my plans. Here's how I wanted to approach this. So if I take a piece out of this, just like I did with the other one, might be a little tighter on this, but we'll see. Now, I'll admit, yesterday when I got this, I had put in some heavier lubricant on the inside just to give it a better feel. I've set some of these up before in the past and they felt actually really good. Not quite as good as my tiled non-magnetic GAN, because it's just the piece design feels amazing, but is there a way that I can make this feel just better than it does out of the box? And absolutely. So here's my plan. I'm going to start off by taking some of these, more of these pieces out so we can have a look of what it looks like on the inside. Okay, so this is what we're looking at in here. And yes, I used a little bit of weight 5 and then another one that has that white residue, but I'm not even going to mention what that is right now because it's not necessarily all that important. Okay, so I'm just going to take one layer out. I'm going to wipe off one of these edge pieces and show you what my plan is, and I'll do an update after all this is done because I'm not going to do it all on stream. This is already video. It's already getting a little long, but that's fine. This is also technically my first real video that I've done about the cube. I have some other ideas that I'd like to put out. I have a lot of content ideas actually, but this is a spur of the moment, unscripted, just story time in a sense, right? So I took this edge piece out, and what do I notice about it? Well, I'm just gonna do a little more wipe in here. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of cubes, it doesn't even matter what brand, how expensive it was, there can be inconsistencies. And it's just a manufacturing thing, not necessarily like problems as much as, let's say, the details. Right here, I could feel it's sharp, just where the pieces go together, right? I was thinking about magnetizing it. I need some super glue, find the right positions, and I'm not worried about that right now. I think I can make it feel really good without it. I can always do that later on in the future. Now, one of the redeeming qualities of the Rubik's brand is durability. And I definitely appreciate that. Because let's just say if I was to drop one of my, setup speed cubes, they're designed to kind of come apart. They're not broken. A lot of people can think that they are, and that's, if they have no experience or understanding of the Rubik's brand versus speed cubes, then it kind of makes sense. But on first initial reaction, a kid gets a new cube and he's used to having his Rubik's brand, but then he drops his new fancy, more expensive speed cube and it explodes and they think it's broken. But no, that's not the case. But these are very robust. I have to hand it to Rubik's for that, which is good. It's just that it's not the most comfortable thing to turn. They are beautiful, in my opinion, so I'll give them that. And you could drop these things, throw them against the wall, and usually they come out on top. They're tanks, right? Now, if we could only find a balance between those two elements, being both durable, extremely durable, as they are now, but also have a better feel, so it's more enjoyable to turn, which is the most important aspect, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Because if it feels nice, then you're gonna keep doing it. And nothing will make you improve more at this hobby if your goal is to get faster, or just more efficient, or just simply to do it as a way of improving your dexterity, pattern recognition, so many other benefits, right? But I'm not going to be worried about putting magnets in it. But what I am going to be worried about, I know some cube shops will send these. This is a diamond file, and there are sharp points. And it's like a mold. As it comes out of the mold with most plastic pieces, what ends up happening is they have these seams, right? And now those seams are now a new potential point for catching and locking up. As you go to turn, it doesn't feel that nice, right? So that's the first thing that I'm going to do, is I'm going to grab each of these pieces out, look to see if there are any, like even on the tracks here, I can see that it's uneven, and you could feel the lip of it coming up. And there's other spots down here that are very sharp, like this is surprisingly sharp right there. And the other side, it's not. But let's see, if I turn around, yeah, okay, it's sharp over here as well too. So I'm guessing this was like one of the points in the what do they call that? Like, okay, so they make a mold, and it's probably going to be a big one of those big sheets that you have to like punch out each of the pieces because they have the tiny little bit that's attached. I'm guessing that's what that was for each one of these, because it's on the same location on both parts of the half shell. So I'm going to smooth those out. And the idea behind this is, if I can get rid of the sharp points, all the extra seams in that aren't necessary, I should, in theory, be able to make it feel like a smoother, more enjoyable cube to turn. And if this is something that all it takes is time and know-how, I think it could definitely be worth it to learn how to do this, because they're easy to get a hold of. It's just that you might not have the most enjoyable experience, right? And this particular diamond file, it was cheap. I got it from Canadian Tire with a little set, and because it doesn't need to be super high-end or anything to be able to do this, it's just plastic. And I got it for metalworking, with some of my previous jobs. But I like this with the rounded side too, because it can help me get into locations or areas like this, right? And smooth that out on the tracks. And so I'm just going to do this with the rest of the pieces. And after that, I'm going to lube it up a bit. I'm going to put some lubrication on the springs if I can get these caps off, so that I could completely remove that spring noise. So if it sounds good, feels good, and I can make it perform better, that to me would be an absolute win. And it can surprise people too when you whip out a Rubik's brand and you're able to solve it really fast and comfortably. Anyhow, I think that's a good place to end this for now. I'll make a follow-up at a later point on potential hurdles or hiccups in the process, what I had to do, and some details. Let's say, for example, right here you can see that number. So that's just like a printing thing, probably serial number, but it's raised. You can feel it. So that also, little details like that change the performance, the feeling, the tactility. So because I love the way this looks, and it's Rubik's 50th birthday from the creation of it, 1974. It wasn't widely released until the beginning of the 80s, but this cube is now 50 years in the making from the Rubik's brand, and this is definitely becoming a more popular thing, and I love that. I'm all here for it. And who knows, maybe one day my level of influence will reach a point that I could become an official Rubik's ambassador, because I would love to share in this hobby with the rest of the world. I think this could help a lot of people in a lot of different ways, especially by getting off our phones and other electronics. It's a lot cheaper of a hobby to get into, than video games and all that kind of stuff. And I think a parent would typically prefer their child playing with one of these as opposed to a game controller in their hand, right? Anyhow, thanks for taking the time. If you got this far, I'm impressed. Like, this was unscripted. The whole purpose of this for me is just to get used to making some content. You know, I'm gonna have some help later on from my beautiful, wonderful girlfriend who offered some assistance in video editing. We also do music together, as you might be able to see. And so I'd like to also have my own music that is associated with our cubes. So I'm gonna do some more recording in that too. So two birds with one stone, in a sense. One, it's a motivation to play music. You know, I've definitely taken an extended break longer than usual, but again, it's one of those things. It's the more beautiful something is, which I spent some serious time making these guitars just beautiful for me, you know, and I try and do the same thing with my cubes, because if they're beautiful, they feel nice, you're gonna pick them up more and you're going to improve. So I will come back at a later point to make a follow-up, probably a little better video edited, and we'll see what the outcome's like. All right, cheers everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.